Cool.
Live.
We're live. What's up, guys? We actually got on here for a change before we talked about the good stuff before the show, Jared. Did you notice that we got right to it this time? You know, those.
Speaking of the good stuff, well, I found this in my collection of mini comics I haven't seen in a while. Whoops, where is it? You ever seen this?
I think I saw it in a video. I don't know if you've shown it before, but I've seen somebody
have it
in a video.
And well, you wouldn't have seen this one in my video. I just sometime this winter I took the Dan Clowes Reader out of the library and read it, and they actually had this reprinted in the Dan Clowes Reader. I forgot it existed, and I didn't. I'm gonna have to stick it in one of my issues of 8-Ball because it was off by itself in my mini comics collection, and it really doesn't belong there. You know, we talked before about just a moment ago about how if you can't find something, you don't have a collection, you have an accumulation.
Yeah.
I like to be able to find stuff. So I would have never found, like, because when I read it in the Dan Clowes Reader, I was like, I have that somewhere. Where? But it came out in '97. And I think it came with an issue of 8-Ball. I don't even remember. It's just this little thing about how he makes comics, and it's pretty cool. It gives you a guide to how, making comics in 1997.
That is
so
awesome.
It's just a neat little book. Like I said, if you want to read it, take the Dan Clowes Reader out of the library, and it's in there. But I'm glad I found it, because I was also just looking for. I was being driven crazy. I'm in a group in Facebook, like Independent Comics of the 1980s. It's called, and someone posted. I collected Zot. Do you know Zot by Scott McCloud? Yeah.
I was actually going to mention him. Yeah.
Yeah. I met, and there was an issue, like 14 and a half, someone posted of Zot by Matt Feazell, who was a mini comic guy who did Cynical Man is the comic he did, and I think still does. So someone posted that, 14 and a half on Facebook, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that one. Then I started remembering, I'm like, I think there's a mini comic Zot that Matt Feazell did. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't for the life of me remember where it was. And I'm looking through my issues of Zot, because I thought I put it by itself in like a bag and a board, the mini comic in with Zot, and I couldn't find. And then someone posted it later on in that thread, and it was issue 10 and a half. So I quickly went back to my issue 10, and there it was in the bag with 10 was this little mini comic of 10 and a half. I was like, it was driving me crazy that I couldn't remember where it was or what it was.
I've done the thing where one comic would get brought up, or one comic would pop in my head, and I would spend hours going through the boxes going, I know I have that thing, and I would find it, But while we're waiting everybody get on here, I think everybody's starting to get out and stuff. I went out this morning. There's people out, and you can tell they're freaking out where they haven't been out. But there's always like 2 or 3 books I'm always kind of looking for before we get into Planetary here. I think it was Tom Sutton, and I've always seen the advertisements for it. I've never actually seen the book. It was from the 70s, and if it's not Tom Sutton, you can correct me. But it's a Charlton Comics, How to Do Comics for Artists, Inkers, and Letterers. And on the cover, you see the back of an artist at his board, and it looks very ECW-ish,
I've seen the cover of it. I don't think I've ever seen the comic. If it's Charlton in the 70s, there's a solid chance it's Tom Sutton, though.
Yeah.
He did a lot of stuff for him.
That's why I'm going directly there, because it doesn't say who it is on the cover. But what gets me is that I've looked it up on eBay and stuff, and this hasn't been a hardcore search and keeping my eye out.
Right.
You know what I mean? But every now and then I'll run across the advertisement. Like, I wonder if it's on there. I never see it on eBay. And then I saw something like Instagram or something. 2 people popped up with it. And I'm like, you son of a, I'm sitting here like, what? So I never find it. But the other thing was, and I don't want to buy a new one. I want the one I had when I was a kid. The John Buscema's How to Draw Comics.
Okay. Someone borrowed that from me as a kid and never returned it.
Mine was tore up. I mean, like, it was stained and everything. I mean, that was one of those books that I tried to take care of. And somebody borrowed that and The Crow from me. This is early 90s stuff, and I never got the John Buscema, how to do comics back. But I think those are two real important things. So
it just popped into my head when you mentioned looking for something on eBay. Where it is. I always point to this. I don't collect statues.
But
I've got this
statue. Yeah.
This is Arwen from CrossGen Comics.
Yeah, Sojourn. Yeah. That's
this just popped into my head because I was just thinking about rereading some of my. That's fun. I started just recently, like keeping track of when I read things. Because I actually have a digital. I keep a digital calendar of when I do what artwork I do, what work I do, where I am at any given day, so I can look back and see what I was when I made something, whatever. And I just started recently, especially. I started using Goodreads because it was like last year I started reading novels again for the first time in a few years, just like free stuff that came from Amazon. So I was like, you know what? I want to write just a little paragraph review on Goodreads or something. Because after you read a digital book on Kindle, it says, "Do you want to review this book?" And I write it just for myself so I can remember what it was about, so I can remember that I read it. And I also started I wanted to write down because stuff I've written reviews of, at least I know the last time I read it. Because it's like, I should read Sojourn again, because I haven't read it in a little while. And I looked up, I read it in 2007 was the last time I read it. And when I was reading it back then in 2007, I was, they had the advertisement for this statue in it. Like I said, I didn't collect statues, but I was like, I wonder if that statue's still available on eBay or something. So I looked it up on eBay, and they had the statue. And sometimes, especially in those days, I'd go on eBay. When you bid on something early on eBay, you never get it.
Right.
If there's like 7 days left in the auction, you never get it. Right. That's the way eBay works. So they had this, and I bid on it. 7 days to go. I think this statue with shipping cost me $20. So it wasn't even like I bid a lot.
Yeah.
So I bid $15 or $10, whatever it was. And then the shipping made it go up to $20. 7 days before it was set to go off. And by the seventh day, I'm like, no one's bidding on it. And sure enough, I won it. No one else bid on it. And I got it for $20. Like I said, I don't even collect statues, but I bid on it. But I used to do that on eBay. I just bid on stuff just to bid on it because you're not going to get it.
Well, it's a dead universe. It's CrossGen, and there's no movie or TV show being made. So
no one wanted it but me.
That's my lifeblood of how I decide what I'm going to look for. What did I want? What's not going on? And everybody's distracted. While the crowd's over here, I'm running in the back. All right, man. Well, let's go ahead and get into Planetary if you want.
Want to get into Planetary? 1999. Did you buy Planetary off the racks as it was coming out?
Off and on, and I got some back issues and stuff because you said 1999. It ended 10 years later. 27 issues. What was it? 3? I got them here. 3 one-shots and a preview issue. Took 10 years.
Yeah.
And this was post 9/11 comic book shop time and all this stuff, and there was a difference, released for me and stuff, right? Because these guys were taking off. What's his name here? John Cassidy and Warren Ellis were doing other things, and John Cassidy hit big at Marvel for a little bit, so you never knew when they were coming out. I would order them online with my comic book shop starting in 2002. So anything from 99 to 2002, I probably backed up.
Yeah, I had it on my pull list. So I bought the issue 1 off the rack and then said, put this on it so I didn't miss it. But it's funny. I was just watching Sleepy Reader's 8th anniversary videos he made. And he called it video in celebration and confessions. And one of his confessions was, it wasn't until a few years ago he knew what a pull list was.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he just never thought that people had he's like, I knew people ordered comics at comic shops, but I never, he never had a pull list. He never knew the concept of a pull list was never in his head for some reason until fairly recently. I was like,
that's hilarious. I'm sure if I think there's something we can all come up with we didn't know about him, like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like, we'll have a blind spot somewhere that we're like, huh?
Yeah, and I remember somebody started talking about something that I wasn't aware of, like a pull list or something that was like, kind of that obvious shit. You're out of the loop. I remember I had my poker face automatically. I knew how to look like I knew what they were talking about. To keep my, so I'm totally with them on that. But Planetary. Real quick, Dennis Hayes. I can't tell if that poster in the back is Homelander or Miracle Man. That is Miracle Man. I think it's Lionel Yu. I think it's his name.
Oh, okay.
And I actually got that for free. So yeah, a comic book shop I was at just had a bunch of posters that he would have in a stack for free because he wanted to get rid of them. So that's an actual promotional poster. I got a ton of them. But Planetary, as somebody who like digs and let's put it out there with everybody, you work in comics, you've worked in comics for a while, and then you got me who's a reader, played around, knew the stories, two different views here. But as a comic book guy, reading Planetary was like exactly what I wanted because I dig the history outside of comics. All the stuff I was interested in ended up tying into comics as I was growing up. So it was a cool big picture in the zeitgeist. So when Planetary came out, Warren Ellis is going in there in each issue just about with a one long storyline. It's sort of like they're archaeologists of the strange, but it's also the archaeology of things that influenced comics and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Archaeologists of the impossible.
Of the impossible, right?
That's what it says in them. I would have gone. I thought it was the unknown. So you said I was about to say archaeologists of the unknown. Then I'm like, I bet it's on the first issue. Let's see. It's archaeologists of the impossible.
Yeah. But that's what I like, man. Warren Ellis got in there. Yeah, there we go. Go ahead, man. Go ahead. Yeah,
I'll open it up.
Yeah,
Planetary.
Yeah, Planetary is probably one of the few books that I think everybody who's really into comic books, like the whole thing about it, they ought to have it. I'll
say right now, Howler Mouse has heard this. I hate the way Planetary ends.
Yeah,
but every other issue is really good.
Yeah,
I mean, I think he wrote himself into a corner and didn't get out of it very well. But other than that, I mean, they're just so good.
Oh yeah, man! Every issue is good, and like I said, I think the biggest thing that might have hurt this was the spur. How it took 10 years to get 27 issues out in those one shots and stuff, right?
See, I'm being an indie collector. I'm so used to that didn't even bother me.
Yeah,
I mean that's the way it is when you're an indie collector, you get the books. My friend gave me this one Christmas. It's a drummer action figure. Whoops, he's one of the characters in Planetary, and he can interface with technology of all different sorts. That's his sort of superpower, and he drums on things to interface with the technology.
Talk to him. And what's the girl's name? I just went blank.
What is it?
Nachaka, something like that.
I just saw it on one of the covers. Now I can't remember.
But anyway,
Winter.
Yeah. So basically, the first issue here, just to catch everybody up real quick, is you have
Jaquita Wagner.
What is it?
Jaquita Wagner.
Jaquita. Okay.
Jaquita.
Yeah. I think I went Natasha with Rocky and Bullwinkle for some reason. But you got three main characters here. Planetary is actually like this great big huge worldwide organization.
There's the drummer.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Awesome, man. And you got Elijah Snow there, who's like, it's his book. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
It's the mystery of the fourth man. Who is the fourth man? He has no memory. That's kind of wiped out. And he's very old. Warren Ellis did this concept with Stormwatch and Authority and Planetary. If you like all of those, this is what you need to get, where you have spirits, sort of spirits of the 20th century. So I think Elijah Snow was born in 1900 or something. I don't know. Jenny Sparks might have been. But anyway.
Yeah, that was Jenny Sparks. She was the spirit of the 20th century.
Yes. So Elijah is very old, but he has no memory of what's going on. and Planetary recruits him because he's been around for a while, and that's what we're going to get into. It's his story, and it has this subplot of a mystery of who's the fourth man and who's the bad guy. Jared, it was just telling who the main bad guys are.
The main bad guys are the Fantastic Four.
Yes. And this convinces me that this is how it should be.
Yeah. They were like and I think that's how he wrote himself into a corner. He made them so powerful, especially Mr. Fantastic was so smart and powerful that he didn't know how to defeat them, and he defeated them in the dumbest way possible. That made me go, that's the dumbest thing ever. So I think that was a problem.
Yeah. How do you outsmart Reed Richards?
Right. How do you outsmart Reed Richards? Who evil Reed Richards with no conscience. So he's perfectly willing to take you out in an instant. So that was the corner he wrote himself into.
Yeah. And Charles was
Doc. He was like the first issue hooked me. Yeah. Where exactly the first issue hooked me because was the Doc Savage character. It was like one balloon because I'm not a huge fan of books that are about like thinly veiled versions of other characters. That kind of annoys me after a while. It's kind of, but in this, I think they did it really, really well. And it was one of the first ones to do it too. So that just flipping through the first issue here, it was all the pulp heroes from the 30s formed this like their own Justice League and then disappeared. Yep. And the archaeologists of the impossible are trying to figure out what happened, and they came across this secret lab. But anyway, long story short, in the first issue, all these pulp heroes saved the world, and no one knew it.
The Shadow, a guy who would have been the Spider, I think. I could open it up and look. Shadow, Spider. Think of anybody from the 30s and 40s, a descendant of William Leather.
Doc Savage.
Doc
Sherlock Holmes must have been in here too,
Yeah. So you take all of those guys that are with their pulp roots and stuff that were really heroes. I'm kind of surprised they didn't touch on the Guardian or the Gladiator. The Gladiator, but and stuff like that. But that's kind of what hooked a lot of people because you knew these were thinly veiled creations of other characters that you got, but there's a purpose behind it. It's kind of like learning real history behind comics.
Right. It's got. I'm not even really a pop culture guy, but I liked the sort of pop culture history stuff. Yep. But it was this last page that really hooked me, where this is where they Elijah Snow finally comes across Doc Savage, who's been there guarding this portal. He's crippled too; he can't move, and he's using his like whatever superpowers to stay alive. Is reserve, and there's just one panel at the end here where he says, and this came out in 1999, so he's been sitting there since the 30s, and he's like, I had to stay here, stay awake in case someone else comes through. I figure the year must be the 1970 or thereabouts. How am I doing? And he's like,
it's like I think if I remember right, it was the Bleed. It was a doorway to other dimensions.
Yeah.
They merged it into how you can travel to like Earth.
And it's like the Justice League, the evil Justice League, tried to come through and conquer our world.
It's a secret society, if you will. Yeah,
right. There's the evil Justice League of Superman. Some kind. Yeah. And there was a big battle between this 30s pulp hero and the evil, which they just mentioned. They don't really show it.
Well, the thing they did there is that's where you get into history. You can go back to Gardner Fox, Justice League 21 or 9 or whatever, where they started the Justice League crossovers. So you had a thinly veiled secret society that could have been Justice Society meeting the Justice League, but it's not good. It's a dark. He brings out a darkness to everything. You know what I mean?
Right. It's definitely it's the old history isn't what you think it is.
Yeah. I love it, man. It's like I
was hooked from that first. I bought that first issue, loved it, and I had I think Stormwatch came before this.
Yeah.
So I had already jumped on the Warren Ellis bandwagon. I actually I can remember Matter of fact, she just got an article on CBR, Marie Javins, and how she's going to save DC Comics. I don't know if you saw that.
I'm staying away now, or I'm going to be.
I know that because I'm friends with Marie. I used to work with her at Marvel. And she was one of the first people to hire Warren Ellis for Hellstorm, I think it was, in the mid-90s, maybe. It was before Stormwatch.
Yeah.
Because I can remember I didn't read a ton of Marvel comics in the 90s, but I'd read an issue here or there because I was around them. I remember reading an issue of Hellfire and going, wow, this is really well written. And that's what made me pick up Stormwatch. Originally, I saw his name on it and went, oh, let's check an indie comic by him. This is more up my alley. And then I picked up Planetary just because I was picking up all the stuff then.
Let me respond to Puff Puff Comics real quick, because the trick with Planetary is, and this is actually what I was going to talk about next, is what I found out is each issue of Planetary, except for one or two of them, are self-contained issues. Every issue is by itself and explores a genre. He has but that's why I was able. What brought this up is Jared always told me about the last issue letting him down, and I found out it's been 4 years and I need to finish it up, but. Puff Puff Comics, I actually have a playlist where I break down every issue, and I got the first 15 up. Just put in Planetary number or Howler Mouse, and it'll come up. And I go through the comic and explain about it. They're like 10, 15-minute videos. But the thing that I found out doing that videos is that the people who have read Planetary and went through it, what I found interesting is they love Planetary, the whole story, but everybody's got their favorite issue. That's the magic of Planetary.
I don't know. I don't get what understand what he didn't understand about it. Did he just not get the references, or?
Well, I mean, you could put it out there, man. Yeah.
I just didn't see particularly. I don't understand how you could not get it.
Well, like when I've talked about Planetary, people always bring up an issue they love, right?
Next one is giant monsters. Like this was the one that went to the giant monster island, right? All the kaiju from the movies are real, and they actually lived on Monster Island at one point.
Yeah, and he gets into the culture that's there. I mean, in the 90s they had like this cult in Japan or something that was going down into subways and releasing gas, and he puts that in here with the kaiju. But it's like it's got that theme of being archaeologists. You got people who go on like a dinosaur dig in real life,
right?
And this one you're sitting there playing with the Easter eggs, like that's Mothra. That's Gamera, that's Godzilla's skeleton, and all this
right.
stuff, and they get into the culture. You just don't have a kaiju big monster 60s to the 2000s Godzilla story going on here. You're immersed in the Japanese culture in that part of the world, and as they go through here, you find a little bit more about Elijah Snow and stuff, right? But there's people. This was the book that hit them that I met, not number one. This was their first one because they were Godzilla fans, and it sucked them in.
Right.
And this is fascinating, man. Pacific Rim, I felt like could have been in this comic years later. When I was watching Pacific Rim, there's little parts of it where I was like, I wonder if they read that. There's no way. But I was like, wait a minute. But this was fascinating, man. Just John Cassidy's slick work that he put in there. And if you're a fan of like old Godzilla movies and like Mystery Science Theater is where I saw a lot of cheesy kaiju movies that I love.
Gamera, friend of children.
Gamera versus Gidaren is my favorite Mystery Science Theater ever. You know what I mean? So, but just the stuff they do in here to hook you. I mean, you have a big 2-page splash of Mothra, but it's not
dead Mothra. Yeah, because all the giant monsters were dead on this island, and they were trying to figure out what was going on, what happened here.
Yeah. You got, I don't know if it's showing up, but you got the 3-headed skeleton embedded in there. We know who that is. Gamora. Wait a minute. King
Ghidra? Is that Ghidra?
Yeah. Okay. I told Jared before this he's going to have fun with me. I've had insomnia 2 nights, and I took 3 different kinds of over-the-counter sleep medicines. So you guys are going to have some fun with me. But we have these in my house. It's always who can win, Godzilla or King Kong, and the top shelf of our DVDs are all our kaiju movies and King Kong stuff. So this is a huge for me. And just to spell it out, if people aren't getting it with the skeletons, we have one that still has flesh, and there's people inside of it pulling parts from a thinly veiled Godzilla there for medicinal purposes and stuff. That's why when I was watching Pacific Rim, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. So they kind of get a little bit more obvious. But that was, like I said, that was just exploring the kaiju element that you can find in comics and pulp culture and stuff. And he nailed it. Everything that Ellis did on this, I thought he nailed, you know.
Puff Puff Comics says Transmetropolitan is one of his top faves. I was not a I can't even say I wasn't. I only read a couple of issues 25 years ago, but that one did not hook me. I found it but I also say that any opinion of mine over 10 years old is expired, because I don't even remember why I didn't like Transmetropolitan really, except that I didn't. But I only read 2 issues of it, so
for me,
I could very well like it now.
Hey, I've got friends that have all the trades. They love it. They're always telling me about it. But I was there. I could have been there from the ground floor up when that book came out. I don't know if I read a preview or the first issue, but it was too much for me. It really felt that when that reporter, Spider Jerusalem or something, popped up, he'd been in, I don't know, he'd been like self-exile or something, and he pops back up and he looks like Alan Moore. At the end of the issue, and Warren Ellis, there's an issue here where he does this again. But by the time that he like shaves his head and stuff, I thought he looked like Grant Morrison. And I thought it was like a dig at Alan Moore. So I just didn't get into the book. I have friends who are always pushing me to get that book, and they love it.
Right.
Maybe one day. I don't know. But
I'm on the same. I generally like Warren Ellis's indie stuff. I don't like his Marvel and DC stuff as much.
I'm hit or miss with him. Ellis, he's one of the few people I can put the art from the artist and separate them, because I had some run-ins with him online in 2009, and there's a weird thing where I walked past his table at Heroes Con one year. Wizard World had come up with Wizard Magazine, tried to knock out Heroes Con by having a comic book convention around the same time, and it kind of rejuvenated Heroes Con, and all these people supported it, and Warren Ellis popped up. Well, Warren Ellis fights with a lot of people online, and he did a few things I didn't like, because we're talking MySpace days. July 4th, I walk in. I was in the military, so, you know, and I was much younger, but I walked on there, and he put up this smart-ass little picture of Paris Hilton riding a John Deere green mower through New York, saying, when we got rid of your little country and set you free and all that stuff, you're welcome. And I said something, and he blocked me on MySpace. Then I got a link. I got a link from one of my comic book buddies where a bunch of the comic book pros were on a message board, and they were talking, and Warren Ellis ran it, I think is what, or at least he was running it.
Yeah, I know he used to have one of the most popular message boards out there that everybody was on.
Well, he kicked me out of it because I didn't realize you weren't supposed to comment. You're just supposed to watch if you're not a comic book pro. He kicked me off of that, and then we had somewhere else. We had one more. I'm like, how do I keep getting Warren Ellis? So I never knew if he remembered me or not. I don't think he did. So I'm at Heroes Con, and I'm not going to go up to his table. He had a bunch of people, and I'm just sitting there like, I don't know if, no, I don't want to know. So as soon as I walked by, he stood up. I don't know if he's Scottish or English, but I didn't understand him. He went full on Cockney or Scottish or something. But he stood up, and he was pointing at me, and he was yelling like profanities and stuff. And I'm looking around like, oh my God, who's he yelling at? And as I turn around, everybody is staring at me, and they're making this circle around me is getting bigger and bigger. And Warren Ellis is just going off on me. I never figured out if he thought I was I didn't know if it was that online stuff that'd been going on for like 7-8 months before this. I don't know. I mean, I never found out, He
thought you were the guy who stole his prom date.
Well, I think what happened was my comment up to that I put under the Paris Hilton thing. I said the only July 4th you need to worry about is 1977 or 76. I had it right when we gave you the Ramones for your little No Future Country. I felt bad, but he immediately blocked me. We gave you the Ramones. Be happy.
I don't think that would be anything that would get him to yell at you at a convention. Who knows?
I don't know what was going on, but I've never had any delusions thinking he remembered me.
Yeah, that's weird.
Back then, he fought with a lot of people. I also knocked off Ethan Van Sciver off of Facebook. I mean, just to tell you,
he fights with everyone.
Yeah.
He fights with everyone.
Now, this issue of Planetary didn't really hook me, but I can get why people get it. This was anime. If you're into anime, this is a
was this anime? I could not figure out. I remember reading this one. I could not figure out what the genre. If it was anime, if it was 80s, like John Woo movies,
or something.
I found this one very poignant, though.
Yeah,
because it was about a ghost who was trapped in Tokyo, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He had some, and what it was is, Planetary's called in because it's exactly what you can see there. If you can see it, he's knocking out cards, he's blasting them, and it's like Matrix meets John Woo fans, 80s anime, ghost stories at the time, cyberpunk. Yet, John Cassidy's clean style doesn't put it like all in your face and doesn't feel chaotic. It's well structured, and the action scenes in it, I could actually see them in a movie. This one didn't hook me, but that's what he was looking at. He was looking at Japanese action. Again, 2 issues in a row where he was just kind of looking at Japanese culture. So I always thought he was talking about manga and anime influencing. And that stuff had a big influence on J. Scott Campbell and Cruz and all those guys in the early 90s who grew up with video games and stuff. But nobody...
The poignancy of the plight of the ghost was what hooked me in this one.
Yeah. Now we're just kind of cruising through here, kind of thinking you've read Planetary. I got that playlist. You can go back if you want to go in deep with them. And we're just going to kind of assume that, you know some of these books at least.
Or if not, they intrigue you and you'll go read them. We're giving you an overview.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one's kind of fun to kind of read. But it's like an action movie. It's kind of mindless. I don't know if it really pushed anything with the plot. I'm sure it did if we go back and read it. But that was
that's also the Planetary really isn't about the overall plot.
No,
it's not. It's about it's kind of about uniting pop culture, but not in a plot way. They're kind of exploring all of pop culture. And then there's kind of an overall story going on too with the Fantastic Four as the villains, but that's almost secondary most of the time.
Yeah, what hooks you is it's got that mystery. Who's the fourth man? Who's Elijah Snow, and who are these bad guys they're talking about? And
the whole time too. In the beginning of the series, Elijah Snow joins Planetary for the first time, and there's some mystery about him. He's even a mystery to himself.
Right.
And his mysteries is revealed as you go along too.
Elijah Snow, to me, and I'm not saying anybody else can look this up or they think it, but for some reason, when Elijah Snow started, he reminded me of The Prisoner, of that old show. For some reason,
I never thought of that. Okay.
Well, that's what I picked up on. It's like he got pulled out of The Prisoner. I mean, I felt like he was some kind of retired spy and they just stuck him out in the desert.
Right.
Because he doesn't create cold, he just pulls the moisture. He works with moisture to make it cold or something, Okay. Go ahead.
I said that just reminded me that Warren Ellis, that's one of the things he did that annoyed me, that I dubbed hyper-realism and the Dr. Manhattan effect, where, if you remember, which they completely... to me, the most interesting thing in The Watchmen was Dr. Manhattan and what I call the Dr. Manhattan effect. In that he left Earth because he was also the only one with true superpowers.
Right.
And he could also do things like, he could see molecules. His perception was no longer human. So how do you exist in a human world when your perceptions are no longer human? He couldn't. He left Earth to go off into space, which makes the whole after Watchmen thing, Doomsday Clock thing to me really. And so that and then you can especially see it with Winter in this, and I think Warren Ellis kind of started it, where there's also another effect I call powers creep. And powers creep is the most interesting thing about a superhero is what? Their powers.
Right.
That's why we read superhero books, because they got superpowers. That's what makes them interesting. Now, what happens in continuing superhero books is Um, writers run it. They can't come up with an idea for a good story. So what they do is they change the power a little bit. So as superheroes go on in time, they have powers creep, where their powers get different and stronger and stronger and stronger until it comes to a point where they now can't think of good stories because they're so powerful. So they depower them. That's like powers creep is a cycle in superheroes.
I like how you have a term for it because we've talked about this with my buddies, but Superman's where we go to. You know what I mean?
Right. He's the ultimate powers creep guy. They have to keep depowering because they keep giving him more powers. And one of the powers creep thing came in was what I call hyper realism, where, like you said, Winter can he can take the moisture out of things. That's what makes them cold. And he can, in order to take, and he's like, I can slow down the molecule. At one point, I remember Simpson, I can slow down the molecules in your brain by taking the moisture. I'm like, you have to be able to perceive molecules in order to have that superpower. Right. That's like when you, it kind of drives me crazy. And that's part of powers creep, but that's a specific thing, which I call, what did I just call? Hyper realism. But it's not like there was another Warren Ellis one I read where he had this hyper realism, which doesn't, or what did I call it? I call it, I can't remember my own term. It's not hyper realism. It's like, it's micro realism. It's realism in one time. It was like a Warren Ellis written issue of some Ultimate series, Ultimate X-Men, it must have been. And he had this fight between Ultimate Colossus and Ultimate, maybe it was Black Panther or somebody who couldn't actually hurt Colossus. He's like a normal powered guy kind of. Yeah. And he was like, and what he did to defeat Colossus was he like somehow threatened his eyes, like with a gun or a knife. He's like, I know your skin may be steel, but I know your eyes aren't steel because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see because your eyes wouldn't work. And I'm like, well, neither would his skin. If his skin was steel, his skin wouldn't work. And that's like, it's realism about one tiny little part of the body. It's like if he can have steel skin and his skin could still work, the largest organ in the body, then his eyes could still work too.
You got me all over the place because now I'm thinking of things. Right. There's an issue of Ghost Rider from the 90s where the guy was invulnerable, but he could still feel pain. And somebody picked him up and used him as a bullet shield. And as he was getting shot, he felt each bullet. Then you got things like Next Men, where I don't think people got the trick of Next Men, John Byrne's Next Men. If you look at him, all he did was take Superman's superpowers and give them to one power to each person. You combine them and they're Superman. And then he explored the hyper realism you're talking about.
Right. But like I said, whenever, and like I said, I always think when someone has a superpower and they can like perceive something on a molecular level, I'm like, they'd go off planet. The Dr. Manhattan effect would come into play and they'd, like it's happened with Magneto. Yeah. Because Magneto's powers used to be a blunt instrument. He could just kind of go, if something was metal, he could just go zoom, but it was like a blunt instrument. It's like magnetism came out of his hand or something. If it was metal, it affected it. If it wasn't metal, it didn't affect it. Then as he went on, he could like build things and destroy things. Just like,
he did a really good in Watchmen. He did a really good idea when you were on Mars with him, explaining why he left and how. And you get in the mind frame of like how irritating people would be. The only thing that was keeping him human was his love of sex, and that was gone.
Like if you want to, I think that's how like all superheroes would end up if they had the power to perceive molecules.
Well, here's what I was getting ready. Yeah, here's what I was getting ready to say. If you want to see what would happen if a hero did stick around, they would have to change their motivations. They'd have to have a reason, and that's where you get Miracle Man when he started influencing the world and stuff. So Alan Moore started that. Neil Gaiman explored what you're talking about.
Okay.
I think. I mean, I don't know. You say these things, but I want to. I got to
think about them for a while.
Yeah, my OCD is kicking in. But one of the things that I actually learned from role playing in the 80s was the Marvel superhero role playing game. And I got so frustrated with it because everybody started getting the same powers. And that's when I started realizing what you were talking about, the hyperrealism. I mean, you just have the terminology.
Right. The micro-realism, that was my term. Micro-realism, because it's realism about only one little part. It's like, there's only realism about Colossus's eyes, not his skin. So it's like, and they throw that in a lot. They'll hit you with they'll come up with a micro where like all of a sudden this one little part, oh, this is super realistic. It's like, well, what about the world around it doesn't follow those rules?
Well, the thing about it is that I don't think everything has to be explained in comics when nobody's asking.
But right,
everybody wanted to do it. See, I call that the Mark Grunwald effect. You know,
he wanted to explain everything.
But I'll finish my sentence here on the role-playing thing. But the role-playing thing, that's what made me start getting critical of everything I was reading and watching, is I realized is that Nightcrawler and Spider-Man can both stick the walls. But look how different those characters are and how they do that. The character came first, the powers were secondary, and you figured out the powers, what makes them really different. It's how the characters use them and stuff. I mean, I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying, but it really made me show how so many characters were just offshoots of Superman, basically.
When you're doing a role-playing game and the characters are defined by their powers,
it's bad.
It's bad because most of the powers you can't differentiate between. It's like they're the same kind of. So it's the character you're in. It's the character. You know, the difference between Luke Cage and Spider-Man on a role-playing game is their powers. The difference between Luke Cage and Spider-Man in a story is much greater.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I was like 12, 13 years old having these realizations because I was like, this is lame. I can only, and all this stuff. But I'm
not really playing with Spider-Man. I'm playing with a guy with these powers.
Yeah. Big Ticket with J Rock says he needs to read the Next Men. Go cheap, man. Check it out. See if you want it. It's not, it's nothing spectacular. It's heroes in the real world with a little bit going on there. But I like Next Men. I just don't really push it on people, But
what's the next issue?
I'm digging this conversation, man. I'm just
I don't remember what this one was about.
It's a takeoff on Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel, Miracle Man a little bit, but it's a takeoff in magical items. It's science and magic mix. I think this is the one where they play around with Thor's hammer.
There's a good double page spread right there, or two splash pages next to each other. Lots of good architecture.
But to me, this is the one where Planetary actually found its voice. This is where I think everything really gelled with what Warren Ellis was wanting to do. You know what I mean? Like everything's warm up, everything's a setup.
Looks like they brought back that bleed thing from the first issue. That's probably.
Yeah, you had to read a little bit of Wildcats, the Stormwatch, and Thor to get the world that Planetary's in, but you don't really need them. But it shows up with a big hammer in a crater, and it's Thor's hammer. And they've got tents up, and they're going a little. Let me put that up there. But
I just want to call out Laura Dupuy for a second, because she was one of the best colorists of the late '90s, early 2000s. She adapted to
maybe it's not the
digital coloring real well, and all this is very nicely colored. Because in the mid to late 90s, there was a lot of bad digital coloring out there because all the colorists were learning it.
I got you, man. Yeah, the color Steve Olive is one of my favorite colors. He's one of the first ones. Christine Skill, I think was her name, from Avengers.
Sheila?
Maybe it's her, yeah. But
Scheele, right?
That's it. Yeah, I learned it's her and Steve Olive. But this one starts playing around with the superhero thing a little bit. It might not have been a hammer, but they find a ship that's bigger on the inside. They start talking about dimensions. Is touching a bit more on the superhero stuff and how it's in its own little genre, and it's setting up for things that are going to be popping up in the future. But to me, this is where Planetary really started gelling and setting. Everything else has been set up and introductions. But to me, this is where Planetary actually starts with that big underlying plot. It's just so cool. I mean, if you're a fan of, like I said, Captain Marvel, a little bit of Doctor Who and some Miracle Man. This is where it starts in this one. And I love that pulp feel to this old cover. I mean, that looks like something that walked out of the 30s, you know, with that feel that they put on there. What's the versatile? John Cassidy is so versatile with
with
his art.
He is.
That artist is cool. And now this is the one that gets brought up to me a lot. Charlton 66 might be happy here.
They bring Doc Savage back.
I'm going to say here, I'm going to show something because I agree with Mark Grunwald here with Charlton 66. Mark Grunwald is more of a DC guy. I think he would have been great at DC. I would have loved to have seen him. After what he did in Quasar and what he did in the Squadron Supreme and how he played around with Nighthawk and stuff, I'd have loved that. But this is the one where after 4 or 5 issues of Doc Savage.
This one's very pulp too. They've got lots of illustrations with. So they're going for a pulp. There's more. There's as much text, and the flashback is all. Then they go back to regular comics.
Yeah.
So they give you a few pages of flashback that's told like a Doc Savage pulp.
Yeah, and you get the story of what's going on in the big secret. And but if you're a Doc Savage fan, this is the issue for you. You know what I mean? We've seen Doc. They've had him. Doc Bronze is what they call him, but we know who he is. But for 4 or 5 issues, you've seen him in the background recovering, and then Elijah Snow is saying, "Tell me what happened," and he starts talking about this secret history a little bit and this evil secret plot going on. And
right.
I think he mentions the 4, but the artwork and stuff, man, I feel like I was reading some pulp novels from the 20s and 30s. And
the next issue, we get the 4,
mm-hmm.
who are the Fantastic Four.
Oh, man. And I read this and I felt guilty about how the Fantastic Four worked so well as villains. I mean, everything in there, the bickering, it's all there. He didn't change anything. Yet
and also, why they work so well as villains is he didn't show them.
Yeah.
They were all just behind the scenes. And Mr. Fantastic was so far behind the scenes that you couldn't defeat him, which is one of the problems I had with the ending. Because Mr. Fantastic, like, didn't he was never even seen. It's like William Leather. Was that the thing?
Yeah, there's a family history there of the Leather family.
Right. And it's like the Thing and the Human Torch were the ones who went out and did stuff.
Yeah, they sent them out and made them do the dirty work, get their hands dirty.
Right.
But
that was another micro-realism thing in here, if I remember correctly.
With
the
Invisible Woman.
Right. Where it's like they all have these incredibly fantastic powers that you can't believe it. It's like the Invisible Woman had to wear goggles in order to see, because otherwise the light would pass. I'm like, really? This guy can perceive molecules in your brain, but the Invisible Woman has to wear goggles when she's invisible? Really?
Yeah. Well, think about the Fantastic Four. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm like, what organism in the human mind can see molecules unaided? Nothing. We've got nothing. But Winter could do that. Yeah, but I'm supposed to believe that the Invisible Woman needs goggles to see. I'm like, really? You got that? Micro-realism takes me right out of the story. So I'm always like, because I've heard that's been a discussion about the Invisible Woman before. He's not the first one to bring it up. Where, how can she see? It's one of those comic book discussions you get in. That really the answer is ignore that, because none of this is possible. It's like, how can the Invisible Woman see if the light passes right through her retina? It's like, don't worry about it.
Have you ever read any Remo Williams Destroyer books?
No, I haven't.
Talking about, okay, well, look up who Remo Williams is, guys, and all the stuff. Yep. But there's a novel. I think there's like there's over 150 books that came out. I mean, they kept that book cranking out. They're great. Yeah. But there was an issue where this guy had a suit that let him, like he was like a ghost. He could walk through walls and stuff. And they spent a whole chapter talking about him having a conversation with somebody about how do you not just like fall through the floor and going through the roof? So they started explaining the bottoms of the souls and all this other stuff, trying to explain it and stuff. And on one hand, it was handled well and fascinating. So I think it can be handled. And but it wasn't necessary to the story. And that's my thing. If you're going to go hyper realistic, make it necessary to the story. We've seen at this time we had what, like 45 years in Invisible Woman. Nobody cares how she sees.
Yeah. You don't have to put goggles on her. No.
Yeah. Now, if we had the debut of the Fantastic Four and the scientist got a hold of him, let's hear the scientist talk about him so we get to know the character.
You know what it is? He had to write her a weakness. He wrote the Four so powerful that he had to give her a weakness that he could, so therefore she could be defeated. That's what was annoying about the goggles.
Gotcha. He had to give her a kryptonite.
Right. He had to give her a kryptonite, and that annoyed me. Like I said, that little bit of micro realism. So that micro realism was her kryptonite, and it was just like,
oh, wait a minute. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to stay on topic, but this, okay, J-Rock, I'm going to hold on a minute. I'm going to be doing my research, J-Rock, because you just piqued my interest here. Doc Samson is an exaggerated take on Doc Savage. I think he might be onto something. Big old, I mean, I don't know if y'all watch the Venture Brothers and stuff, but he's a big old Led Zeppelin, butt charger driving, mullet wearing lover, big jock and all this stuff. But he does some amazing stuff, and he used to be spies, and they even stuck him in G.I. Joe. You know what I mean? Okay, Jay, I got a kick out. That's why I love doing this. Somebody will bring up something like that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, here we go. Okay. Matthew Rasco says, leaving the villains ambiguous makes their actions and motives more terrifying.
He really did that in Planetary. He did.
Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm down with the Venture Brothers stuff.
And they're mentioning Mark Gruenwald's Captain America early on. Mark Gruenwald's Captain America was the last mainstream comic book I bought all the way. It's like when the 90s were rolling around, I mainly stopped buying DC. Like there was no DC and Marvel stuff on my pull list from like 1988 on, except for Gruenwald's Captain America, which wasn't the greatest comic, but I always enjoyed it. So I kept that one on my pull list. That was the last one. Matter of fact, it jumped. It finally, Captain America was on my pull list from like 1981 until Rob Liefeld got on it.
J.M. DeMantis and Mike Zeck's run is underrated, big time.
Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff.
And Mark Gruenwald was excellent. Yeah, Mark Gruenwald's Captain America is a fantastic run, but I think he should have left after 350.
I think Mark Gruenwald got something about Captain America that other writers didn't. Mm-hmm. In that Captain America, because I always say there's two Batmans. There's the Batman in his regular book, and there's the Batman in JLA, who's like super Batman. There's two Captain Americas too. There's Captain America in his regular book, and there's Captain America in the Avengers. Right. Captain America in the Avengers could be this like preachy guy, stuffy, preachy guy. But the Captain America in his real book, I always thought, especially Gruenwald captured this, Captain America is his effect on other people. Mm-hmm. So that Captain America like inspires other people around him to be great. That's like his greatest superpower. Yeah. And you can see that in Gruenwald's run too, where he had like a lot of sort of reformed or trying to reformed low-level villains, like as regular characters in his Cap book. And they were trying to be better people. And they were trying to be better because of Captain America's example. Captain America wasn't preachy about anything. He didn't. Yeah, he wasn't, trying to get them. They just because he was such a good example, they wanted to be better.
He wasn't trying to be everybody's dad in his book.
No, he was not.
And the Avengers, they tried to make him Thor and Iron Man whenever it was appropriate, but they really turned it up with Thor as the mentor, the dad of the team.
Yeah.
But people came to Cap a lot. They kind of looked at him. But Greenwald's Captain America run, I mean, he got Steve Rogers, he got Cap, and the stuff they played around with. If you read, was it 332 to 350, where he gives up the costume, becomes the captain because he works for the American people, not the American government. He did a real good job of exploring what Captain America and Steve Rogers really was.
Yeah, I haven't read those in such a long time that I don't even remember most of the individual stories.
Well, there's stuff. I mean, he was really looking at America and racism and stuff. He handled it really well, but he kind of lost me a little bit when he brought in two characters named Right Winger and Left Winger. And Mark Grunwald turned into being the guy preaching that you see.
Sometimes it could be a little goofy. That was always the knock on his cap, is it could get goofy.
It
could.
When we had Thor, when we had Cap Wolfman, it was
Cap Wolf
in Cap
but
armor.
Firestorm Hyena was first, but nobody makes fun of that because Cap Wolf is so much more fun to say.
Because Firestorm isn't Captain America.
I know. and Fire Hyena is just hard as no one cares. But
you didn't really take, Captain America's A-list, Firestorm is a C-list character at the time.
One of the assistant editors dressed up as Cap Wolf for Halloween, one of our office Halloween parties in the early 90s. He had a Captain America costume with a werewolf head.
Well, I'll tell you what, since we're on this topic, see if I think I just went blank. No, Walt Simonson, how he got away with turning Captain America into a frog. I mean, Thor. I was there. I mean, Thor. What did I say? Captain America? Excuse me.
Thor.
Yeah, turning Thor into a frog and then a 6-foot frog on top of that later. I don't know why I was down with that. I was digging it. I was there.
I did not like it. No, I was one of the people who was put off by Frog Thor. I don't remember it now, really. I just remember I still bought it. I mean, it was
what a lot of people don't realize is one of the reasons I'm getting way off topic here, but I'll get back. But anyway, what got me is that if you read some of the X-Men books, there was a Morlock, and I think he was like a Pied Piper or something. He could talk to frogs and alligators, the alligators in the sewers and swamps. So it was already set up that there was a world and they talked to each other. Thor gets turned into a frog, and it's like this fairy tale Norse little kid story, with all the wars going on between the frogs and the alligators and stuff. He just pulled something from the X-Men that a lot of people didn't realize was already set up, very subtly. I mean, we're talking like 3 panels.
I'm flipping through the 4 issue. There's the moloids, the mole people.
There we go.
Then we flip over to the next page. We get the 4. There's the 4 there.
Yeah.
Fantastic, with their rocket in the back,
but
going up and getting their, and that it's like also too. This came out in 1997, and I think that the 4 have been around since the 60s. So they've been running things behind the scenes for a long time.
In real time. Now, the thing about the Fantastic Four, the 4 being the bad guys on here, is that everything's there, and he even brought up things that I noticed as a kid reading the Fantastic Four about why are they doing this. It goes all the way back to Fantastic Four, like 120 or 121, which is a Galactus story. But you open up the page, and Reed Richards has made this machine for his kid, Franklin. It's a machine that's like this big, and it actually has like I can't think what it's called. It moves a track on it, and it makes chocolate chip cookies in 6 seconds. And I'm like, why is he not giving this to the world?
I want that chocolate chip.
And I'm like, if all these, and I've always said this about Marvel, these are such great scientists and stuff. Why don't we have like prosthetics being made and them curing things and putting out all this technology? If you go back to like one of the She-Hulk issues by John Byrne, Reed Richards is there helping out NASA a little bit. He's already been to space and has the rockets that work. Why not give that to him?
That's one of the things you have to ignore.
Right. Well, Warren Ellis took that with your hyperrealism, and that's why the Fantastic Four are the bad guys. They're keeping all this technology from us. They've stumped us. That's what the real bad thing about humanity is. They're keeping up all this stuff. I mean, they wiped out a whole dimension just so that they can have a place to store all these weapons and stuff.
Right. I forgot about that.
Right. So, of course, the Fantastic Four are bad guys. He didn't really change anything. And the way they bicker amongst each other in the comic, that shows you their personality. They're petty people. Yeah. Scott Connor is on here. All I want are chocolate chip cookies now. Yeah. Now, skipping ahead here, we are here with an issue I both love and hate. This is number 7. And this
must be a Sandman issue. I don't remember this one just looking at the cover.
Well, this goes back to me like suspecting that. I mean, I'm going to have to do some, I'm going to have to do a Google search, but I really believe Warren Ellis has a problem with Alan Moore because this is a Vertigo, looking at the Vertigo genre, which I loved. But what he did was Transmetropolitan that I read. Everybody is showing up for this John Constantine-like character that's died.
Yes.
And you start getting a little bit of history on Chiquita. Was that her name?
Anyway. Chiquita, yep.
and Chiquita and all this stuff. And basically at the funeral, it's really wild, but
there's all of Vertigo at the funeral.
Everybody take a look at this, right? Because what gets said about this, you have your Doom Patrol, your Animal Man, your Swamp Thing, all these great books. And then Warren Ellis has one of the characters look at him and like, don't they look ridiculous now? They were of their era. He's trying to say that all of Alan Moore's stuff and Grant Morrison stuff and the Vertigo stuff was dated. It doesn't really count.
I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's 10 years difference between here and the culture that produced them. But don't they look faintly ridiculous?
I mean, you talk about right to the heart. Because to me, it wasn't that character saying it. This is Ellis saying it. And
you know what? I never liked Vertigo. All through the 90s, I did not like Vertigo. I did not buy Vertigo. I bought all the pre-Vertigo stuff before it was around. The Alan Moore Swamp Thing wasn't actually Vertigo.
Right. Yeah. Nancy Allen A. Collins had the first issue that was ever a Vertigo book of Swamp Thing. Yeah.
And so I can remember resenting that Vertigo was all of a sudden taking credit for stuff that was before Vertigo. That annoyed me as a comic fan.
My thing with
Vertigo, like I said, I was just never a Vertigo fan.
I like the
Vertigo.
Didn't bother
me at all. I kind of laughed along with them.
I wasn't a fanboy for Vertigo. I knew people that were, but I mean, they had some stuff that was really just not that good. But the thing about it is overall, I thought Vertigo was great. It was like a step. It was like carrying on. It was kind of it was a
to me. Vertigo was mainstream indie comics. It was watered down. So I was
that says it all, man. That says it all, man.
Yeah, Vertigo was too mainstream for me, man. I was out there.
Wait a minute, you were working
at Marvel. The mainstream, man.
You were working at Marvel at the time. I think you're biased. I'm just going to say.
No, but I never read much Vertigo at all. Just because there was nothing. I can't even tell you what was Vertigo in the 90s besides Sandman. Sandman Mr. Theater was pretty good. That's one I read. The Guy Davis, Matt Wagner. I did enjoy some of those Sandman Mystery Theaters.
The Morlock controlling gators and vermin was named Piper. I was in the bar.
If you can control gators and vermin, you better be a Morlock who lives underground. Otherwise, your powers are useless.
Charlton 66, Sandman Mr. Theater was awesome. That's what I mean. A lot of the greatest books, I think, to me, here's it is. This is like going back to the 70s, and I'll shut up about this. I'm not being confrontational. I'm not that.
No, Tim's talking about the 70s again.
But I know. I can't help it. But Vertigo to me was like DC in the 70s. All their best stuff wasn't the superhero stuff. Anything that wasn't traditional superheroes was their good stuff. I'm just,
Yeah. Well, I did read Sandman Mystery Theater quite a bit. So obviously I didn't hate all of Vertigo stuff.
But I recommend this one right here. I both love and hate it because I feel like Ellis is just
goofing on Vertigo.
I think he's just got a thing about Alan Moore. I'm telling you, man. Oh man. Okay. And then this one. And do you like B movies from the 50s and early 60s? You like those drive-in theater monsters, the Mantis, them? I have them and all this stuff.
Dave the Triffids, Attack of the 40-Foot Woman.
I love how he tied in another genre from the 50s. Yep. Just face it, this is when Batmite was showing up. This is when everybody was fighting. In comics, everybody was fighting some giant alien or a monster or something like that. And even the cover looks like a 1950s drive-in theater poster.
They got to fight giant ants in this one.
That spray acid out of their mouth.
That spray acid.
But these are the experiments of Reed Richards, is how he tied it into the story. Yeah. The 50-foot giant man, he grew to be 50 feet, but his brain stayed the same size. I mean, there's just horrific things. That's why you don't see them around. So this explores those old B movies, 50 movies, these classics and stuff.
There's a Marilyn Monroe ghost in here too. I don't remember that.
Yep, with pop culture. Yeah, it's of the era. She's our person to explain what happened back then.
Okay.
He played, and that was set up in that anime manga issue number 3. See, the thing calls back. The first couple issues
sets up how the ghosts work and stuff
yeah,
like that.
Yeah, he made the rules for this. I think that's called that contract with the audience, where I'm going to set up some rules. You don't ask questions, and I won't go out of those rules, and we'll all suspend our disbelief. Warren Ellis did that great in this series. He never
except when he hit us with that micro realism.
Yeah. And then you like your 60s spy Nick Fury stuff?
Oh, that's this one.
Yeah, what he does in this, I'm not really going to go into it because it's highly Steranko influenced, and he goes out there. But basically, the government, you find out, is experimenting with bringing imaginary characters into the real world. That's all I can really get into it. But if you like your Nick Fury, your Steranko stuff, this is the issue for you because this guy comes back. Is it Stone?
And Jaquita was the badass of the book.
Yeah,
she was the muscle on the team.
Yeah, Jaquita has ADHD, so they have to keep her busy. He's also hypersexual, but he was very tasteful on dealing with that. If she got out there and was fighting, well, we'll show it in a minute. She was fighting Batman and some of these guys. When she had a guy that went toe to toe with her, she kind of got turned on by it. And her ADHD really kept her always wanting to go out there. And she wasn't a hothead, but she was just already like, I need some action. Then you had Drummer, who's in the background. He was just a wimp. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, he was not a fighter. He was finding out stuff. He was the communications guy.
Yeah, he was yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into this, but this is where Ellis started becoming Ellis with concepts. I mean, it kind of came back. But I think you also found out that Elijah Snow, the guy that he replaced, they start talking about how he disappeared. And that's going to go back to Doc's bronze there. About, there's
that's
a lot
part of the mystery.
Yeah, there's a mystery there in these books. When you sit down and read them all, they all call back. But here's the book that was hot for a hot second, and everybody wanted this one. And this is when I started knowing people really talking about Planetary. This is where we get our Justice League, and we see the Fantastic Four. This was the plot of an old Challenge of the Super Friends cartoon, where the bad guys went back in time and they stopped Wonder Woman from becoming Wonder Woman, Superman from becoming Superman. But they're killing babies in this one. Our
splash page got the bracelets, the cape, the lantern.
Yeah, number 10 is the one that I've got 2, 3. I pick this up whenever I find it because I love reading this one. It's very morbid, but it makes you hate the four. When Superman Baby, who's an alien, lands in Kansas, the Human Torch is there to torch him, and Reed's telling him in his ear to just do it. So they kill the Superman Baby before he becomes empowered by the sun. They blow up Paradise Island, and the Green Lanterns in this world that are Green Lanterns, they have the Green Lantern embedded in their chest, and they dissect him for fun just to pull out the lantern and look at it.
There's Alien Baby Superman.
Yeah. So basically, the Fantastic Four used a old Challenge of the Super Friends cartoon plot to go back and stop the characters but he hyper realistic it. They're killing babies and dissecting the aliens and and all this stuff. And I was watching this as a DC guy. It was tearing me up. I was like, let's shed a tear.
Up there's Planetary ruling the world with the authority. I must have these in chronological order.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's funny about that, if I remember right, Planetary and Authority never meet. They never meet in that book. You get the same story going on from their point of views, but they never meet, I don't think.
Phil Jimenez, pencil, and
Phil Jimenez. Yeah, Phil Jimenez is a mixed bag for me. There's
that bleed again.
Yeah. Phil Jimenez kills me because if I want George Perez, I will buy George Perez.
I know what you mean.
You conjured Sleepy Reader up from where you talked about an hour ago.
There.
All right. I'll tell you what. Let's.
I never was a fan of square-bound comics. They don't open.
I don't like how this seam where you can open them, they don't open at the spine. There's a seam there, and that thing will wear down and crack your cover, I think. So I read those gingerly. if I read them at all. Okay, we got quite a few people hanging in there. Matthew Rasco, Scott Connor, Sleepy Reader. Hopefully, Charles 66 is still there. I mean, we got to get on the phone, brother. It's been a while. Jay Rock's out there. Cool, man. All right. We may not get through all the Planetary stuff, but we'll pick it up later. You know, it's no biggie. And then we get a big call back to even more
Steranko here
stuff, where we're getting more and more into the spy stuff, and the mystery and plot thickens. They bring in the spy aspect. And this is the one I really don't want to like delve into too much, because it's a complicated story that you really got to read and kind of absorb. I mean, this is where Ellis goes off and he really gets into that psychedelia feel of the 60s a little bit, even though it has nothing to do with drugs.
Cassidy is changing his art style in this. He's changed his art style in some of the issues to match them, but he's really changed his art style here too.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because, like I said, he's versatile. When they explore these genres, Cassidy is nailing it. I mean, I totally get why it took so long for each issue to come out, because I'm picturing in my mind Cassidy doing research, looking at books from that era. Like I said, the 50s one, I mean, I could see him referencing the Marilyn Monroe and trying to look at movie posters and stuff. So when he explores these genres like that, I mean, you're getting the even the feel of the era it's from. I mean, it's very subtle. But like I said, when you read it's really noticeable when you sit down and read them all at once. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not waiting months and months and months for the next issue.
And he even switches back to his regular style after he's out of the 60s stuff.
Yeah.
After he's out of the Steranko stuff, he switches back.
See, I love it when an artist or a team can manipulate the reader. Like, that felt like a flashback without him saying it was a flashback. It was the art style that made you feel that way. And then when you turn the page, you're back.
Look at that splash page. Very Steranko-esque in there. Guy just getting shot in the head.
Yeah. And the thing you're talking about last week about art being interesting and stuff, his art is interesting. All right, here. Are you still up for this? Are you losing interest, Jared? Or are we still good to go? I mean,
what was that?
Are you still good to go, or
still good to go?
Okay.
Sleepy Reader votes for Commandy if we're voting on what to tackle down the road.
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, we got somebody saying Conan down the road, and
there's a lot of stuff. Conan.
Yeah, I can.
Which Conan?
I don't know.
There's a lot of Conan.
There's a lot of Conan and a lot of fantasy to talk about, you know. So
one of my favorite Conans, I used to, when was it? The early 2000s. There was a time when I was collecting mostly trade paperbacks and hardcovers, probably like 2005 to 2010 or so. And one of the things I was buying, just because it came to it, by that point, it's like people don't know, in the 90s, nothing was in trade paperback and hardcover.
Mm-hmm.
By the time the 2000s rolled around, maybe from 2005 to 2010, everything started being in trade paperbacks and hardcover. That's when it really, from 2000 to 2005, most stuff, I mean, a lot of the popular stuff was collected, but it wasn't until like after 2005 really that everything, as a matter of course, started being collected.
Oh yeah.
So I started buying the Dark Horse Conan, the individual issues at first. I really enjoyed it. That was Kurt Busiek and Carrie Nord. And then but after a while, after buying it like in individual issues for 2 years, I know they started coming out with these hardcovers. Mm-hmm. Really nice hardcovers that were like $20. So it's like they were cheaper than the individual issues, and they were hardcovers.
It's
so
wild. Yeah, it's
so I
wild.
started not buying the individual issues and just buying the hardcovers.
So you were right there with how the collectors were changing too. That everybody was coming up with that idea, and that played a part into comic book sales starting to decline. Right after Marvel had come out of bankruptcy with Joe Quesada. That's when I remember everybody waiting, and there was a few books I was doing that with, because I started noticing the storytelling was different. I could tell they were thinking about trade. I mean, it's a reality that I think that hurt comics, where they started thinking trade. you know.
Well, in the 90s, they didn't used to put things out, at least in trade, at least not very fast. If they'd be just they thought it would cannibalize the monthly sales. And, you know, when you're selling a whole bunch of issues a month, you don't want to cannibalize it. So I understood that thinking. But I bought Conan in hardcover for a few years. I think I had like the first 13 Dark Horse volumes, which I've since gotten rid of, except for volume 0 is one of my favorite Conan stories.
Terry Nord's art in that series is so yeah.
And the story was kind of poignant too, because it took place in young Conan's days. So he was still in Samaria, or Cimmeria, as I used to say as a child. They were still in Samaria, and who was it? The Aquilonians? Are they the Romans? There's like a Roman.
Oh yeah.
I think it's the Aquilonian. There's like in a lot of Conan, there's civilizations that are supposed to be like old civilizations. They're standing. Yeah. And I think Aquilonia was supposed to be the Romans situation. So they were encroaching on the Northlands and on the borders of Samaria. And the story
I don't have a map. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they built I think it's the Aquilonians who were supposed to be the Romans, though. So they built a town near the border of Samaria, and once the Romans built a town near you, they moved in. They moved their army in. You became Romanized, and Conan actually had a girlfriend in the town too. So some of them, but it got to the point where the Sumerians realized we got to uproot this town or they will take us over eventually. So by the end of the end of the book is the Sumerians completely wiping out the town, including, you know, Conan's girlfriend, including they even liked some of the people in the town. It's not like they didn't like, but they knew that this was step one of Aquilonia taking over their land, and they couldn't have that. So it was just like the end of the book was just this brutal destruction of a town by the Sumerians. And it was just like, it was just so sad and poignant. But you knew they had to do it if they wanted to survive, especially since we know ancient Rome and what they did. So that was one of my, I don't have to reread that one. That was one of my favorite Conan stories.
See, I would have to do research again on stuff like that, because I picked up, like, I totally got that these were supposed to be the Romans, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
But I just went with the story. To me, I would read a Conan story and be like, that was a good one, and I'd be ready for the next one. I never really got in there and delved. I'm going blank. I did know a few of them. But to me, the perfect Conan story is Red Nails. I've got that in 3 or 4 versions of that story. To me, that's the perfect Conan story. I mean, that's... Right.
Well, this was the only Conan story where I really saw them dealing with the Aquilonians being the Romans and what would happen if the Romans really posted up outside your country and were on the borders of your.
What was the Grace Jones? I'm trying to think of the country she came from. She felt like the most realistic thing out of a Conan book in that Conan Destroyer book. And that was thanks to Gary Conway and Roy Thomas talking to Hollywood when they saw them starting to chop up their script. And they stopped them there. They were talking about, you know, he told me the story, but he really flipped out. And he was like, look, you don't understand this character in this world. These people would be like, I don't know, you need somebody like Grace Jones. That's who she is. So they called up Grace Jones and gave her the job. Roy, as an example, they just went ahead and called and said, hey, you want this? So
it's your job.
Oh, did I wake you up? You okay? All right. We're probably going to be on here just a little bit longer.
Yep, you got to leave between 12 and 12:30, you said? Let's see how long we can push it.
Oh, yeah, no problem. No problem. Do we want to go on with Planetary or do a part 2 one day?
We can read some. We'll do Planetary. We'll bring issue 12 next, and we'll talk about. I just finished reading some Hellblazer. The Richard Corbin Hellblazer. Really good. Issue 146 to 150.
I feel like
Brian what was it? Brian Azzarello wrote it, who I'm usually not a fan of, but with the Richard Corbin art, it was terrific. Oh, and I might make a video on this, which I just finished reading. For the first, one of my George Sprott.
Nice.
This is by Seth, the one named cartoonist, who is one of my absolute favorites. And this came out. It's funny when I look back how long ago things came out. This came out in 2009. And they're almost like it's almost like a bunch of sometimes they're continued strips, but sometimes they're almost like big Sunday comic strips. And I don't know how much of Seth you've read.
He's not ringing a bell.
I saw on Sleepy Readers his talking about the Mount Rushmore of comics. If there was a Mount Rushmore of current cartoonists, he would be on mine. Seth.
Nice.
And he's very involved in nostalgia. And I'm not a huge nostalgia guy, but holy cow, does he do nostalgia? Because this is all about, like I said, it says 1894 to 1975, and that's what George Sprott was like a Canadian. He was on because Seth is Canadian, so he was like on local Canadian TV from like the in the character, not in real life, but in the character from like 1950 to 1975 when he died, and he was one of these guys who in like the 20s and 30s like went up to the Arctic on expeditions and would make magazines about it. So it's just about this guy's life.
That is awesome.
And it is just so dripping with nostalgia. Like it makes you nostalgic for a time you weren't even around.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And this guy isn't particularly heroic. He's got all sorts of flaws, and they just go through it. And there's like little flashbacks to the different parts of his life. And, by the time like no one was even watching his TV show in the early 70s, it wasn't even popular at all anymore. And it's just kind of about a man's life and what happened. And also his like TV show doesn't even exist anymore because the local Canadian station threw out all the tapes in the early 80s. So it's just like this nostalgic look at this guy's life who used to be famous in a small way in like Western Canada and now is completely forgotten. Except for at the end, they have like this one guy who's in the current day who like he's like a George Sprott, a George Sprott collector, and he's like he's the one digging at. He's like showing you. Let me see if I can find the thing. He's like showing you all the stuff. He's like I've got this one rare tape from the early. Here's the epilogue. There's this one, and he kind of looks like George Sprott too. This heavy set guy. And he's going through all the stuff in his George Sprott collection. Like, oh, I've got this thing, I've got that thing. And it's just like such a small, granular piece of George Sprott's life that you're like, wow, that's all that exists of this guy now, who was like a big star in this part of the world for 20 years. And it's really, really good. Really enjoyed rereading this. Like I said, I think for the first time in 11 years, it's crazy how much time passes these days.
I'm going to pull out something here. I don't think it's like, we'll see. I'll just let me grab it here. I'm going to pull out all of them and stuff, but like I've got a ton of these, and I've actually got one with a punk band record that came with it and stuff, man. But I don't know if you remember Berkeley Breathed.
Breathed.
Berkeley Breathed. I don't know if this stuff here. I read these in the strips. I was the kid that looked for Far Side, Peanuts, and this in these, and I would cut them out, did the collection. And it's just amazing me that as I'm rereading the 80s, as I'm older through these, like I pull them out. I don't sit down and like binge read these, but I just go through while I'm done because I've got a ton of them. But it really amazes me how topical this is. And there's so much stuff I just did not pick up when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So I'm rereading this, and it's bringing that nostalgia for the 80s in there. I mean, there's stuff in here that is there's just a few things in here that would just outrage people today, and this was like in the funnies, and it's not that I mean, it's really not that big a deal, but there's some attitudes and the way people talks and stuff, like it just kind of reminds you of how sensitive, and it really is the word sensitive, people are, because you got to have a sense of humor when you're reading this. It's making fun of everything, but every now and then he takes a stand, but just
I remember reading that in the 80s. Oh. Sleepy Reader says, I don't think I've ever read a Seth comic. It's funny, once people label a literary cartoonist, as much as I read, I instinctively avoid. That's funny because I think of Sleepy Reader as a literary guy, because when he like reviews comics and things, he's very literary about them.
There's people outside of comics I recognize that are art that I like. There's this one guy who does children's books, but he uses colored pencils. And I'm trying to think. I think it might have been Charleston 66. It showed me his stuff. I know the guy that does the line work that was famous forever from the New York Times or something. Everybody knows who he is. They know his artwork, Right.
And if you want to read Seth's most current thing, he just finished up Clyde Fans, which you can get out of your library or off of wherever. Big, thick book that he's been working on for 20 years. Really good stuff. It's about two guys. Once again, his stuff is so much about nostalgia. It's two old men reminiscing about their life and how they used to run a fan business. Calvin and Hobbes.
If you want to be nostalgic.
Like I said, in my lifetime, there have been three great comic strips: Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes, Farce 4, and Doonesbury. Those are the 4 great comic strips of my lifetime.
Say those again. Peanuts,
yep. Calvin and Hobbes, The Far Side, and Doonesbury.
Doonesbury I could never get into. So I've got
great.
3 out of the 4. I've got almost complete sets. I've got almost all the stuff.
And I now put early Gasoline Alley in that. That was long before my lifetime, but Gasoline Alley, Walton Skeezix is as good as those 4.
Yeah, and if I could find more Pogo stuff, I'd probably stick that in.
Pogo's excellent. Yeah,
I've got sporadic little books of Pogo, but everything I get is beat up. I mean, Walt Kelly, man, what is that? I mean, he even made it into American Splendor, the movie. They're talking about
as good as Walt Kelly is. I like those other 5 better than Pogo. So,
Gore Vidal agrees with you. We got Prince Valiant. Cool.
I was never that. Prince Valiant is one of those I'd like to look at, but
Seth did Mr. X.
That's where I first saw him, and I wasn't too fond of his work on Mr. X just because it came after the Hernandez brothers. They're a tough act to follow, and he was young and just starting out. But when I look back on it now, I like it better.
I've got to get some Mr. X stuff again. The Mr. X stuff that I looked at back in the day was borrowed. It wasn't mine.
Okay.
And it made an impression on me. And I think this is the second time, I don't know, somebody else's Mr. X has popped up about 3 or 4 times on my online,
Even the stuff from the last 10 years or so by Dean Motter is pretty good Mr. X stuff. Okay. I enjoy that.
Huh. Nice. All right, man. I tell you what, we're going to have to wrap this up. I'm going to change the title to Planetary, Conan, and comic strips or something here, man. But I'll get in touch with you. Maybe we can do something during the week or something, or maybe same time. And guys, make sure that you sub this channel, Jared's channel, and make sure you hit the bell, hit the.
My name is Jared Osborne. You can find me.
Yeah, and all that stuff. But told Jared beforehand I got to get off here between 12 and 12:30. So thanks a lot. Check out the Planetary playlist that I have, or just put in, look up the individual issues
in detail into individual issues.
I still can't believe it's been 4 years since I've
done one.
Didn't even finish it. I'm planning on finishing them. That's why God is talking here.
I've always wanted to do a video of like me reading a particular series and then just what I think of right after I put the comic down. Like after each issue, I just put it down, and like just me in a chair sitting there, and I'll read the issue, turn the camera on, talk about it, turn the camera off, read the next issue, turn the camera on. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I always wanted to see if I can make that interesting.
Oh, I'd be interested to see if that'll work. I mean, they've got reaction videos for everything else, people watching other videos and TV shows and all this stuff. So that'd be cool. But hey, I appreciate everybody popping in here. And again, we'll take suggestions, questions, and comments, and that'll set us up for next time. I guess we're going to have to, at some point, really do talk about Conan and Commandy or something. You know, like I could talk Conan all day, but when it comes into like the stuff you went in depth in, I'll probably just sit here and listen and be like,
Conan. Yeah. There's so much Conan that we can only talk about our favorite Conans, which might not even be the same thing.
Conan survived just like Batman is. There's so many different things he's survived. Bad cartoons, one great movie, stuff like that.
1970, that's 50 years of Conan comics.
Yeah. And everybody still talks about the first 12, But like I said, I love my Conan. The pulp books were there. I read those as a kid. Red Nails is my favorite. And the Savage Sword of Conan magazines was like my stuff. But the problem with me is that the whole thing about Conan is the stuff that there's so many times you can just adapt his books until you finally go back and read them. Then you got the stuff after Robert E. Howard. As much as he survived as a great character, there's not a lot of stuff that I can like.
I've been reading the Conan stories for the first time ever just this year. The actual short stories and stuff. Now, I've never read them before.
It's dawning on me. There's people who have done papers on the Hyperborean age, and because they're professors, whatever you want to call them, college teachers, were fans of Conan and the books, they let them get by with it. You know what I mean? I was like, it always kind of made me mad because I'm like, hey, I'm like, but the Commandy stuff, man, all I got to do is flip through that stuff and it all comes back to me and stuff. Maybe we can do post-apocalyptic. I did a show years ago about post-apocalyptic comics, and those things always do well in the long run. I call those slow burn videos. Right. Those will accumulate a lot of views over time. But
evergreens.
How are you set up on Conan stuff? You have some Conan stuff? I mean,
I don't have much left anymore, but I've read plenty of it.
Commandy, yeah.
Commandy, I don't know what I have left. I used to have I've gotten rid of so many of my collected editions over the last 3 years, just because I was broke, that I don't know what I have left and but I've read, Commandy. I can always that, and I have so much stuff digitally these days, just because I know how to find it. But I don't know what it is because it's like I'm a digital hoarder.
Yeah,
it's like all the stuff I buy, I then go and hoard digitally too, but I never look at it. And then I've got Hoopla where I can now download stuff. I've got stuff that I bought digitally on Amazon because it was just so cheap. But it's like I have no idea what I have digitally because it's just hoarding. It's not like comics where I know where they all are. I can look at them. But digitally, it's just like, oh, there's that. It's $3 on Amazon for 30 issues of Marvel Team Up. Okay.
The only difficult thing about really talking about Commandy is that every issue of Commandy would be like 3 to 6 books today. So much happens in it. Scott's ready to steal your idea of the comic book reaction videos, and this is what it would have been for us, especially the last 10 years. I say go for it.
All right, why not?
All right, man. Well, I do not want to get off here, but it is that time.
All righty. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hang in there and do all that stuff we said there, man. Thanks for everybody that popped in here. Later.
All right.